The books of Ezra and Nehemiah. In most modern Bibles, these books are separate, but that division happened long after it was written. It was originally a unified work written by a single author. The story is set after the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem and its temple and took many of the people into exile. And this book picks up about 50 years later and tells the return of some Israelites to Jerusalem and then what happened when they rebuilt the city and their lives there. Specifically, the book focuses on three key leaders who led the rebuilding efforts. You have Zerubbabel, then Ezra, and then Nehemiah. And the book's design focuses on the efforts of each leader. Zerubbabel leads a large group of people back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. Then, about 60 years later, Ezra arrives in Jerusalem to teach the Torah and rebuild the community. And then he's followed by Nehemiah, who leads the rebuilding of Jerusalem's walls. And these three stories are designed to be parallel. Each begins with the king of Persia, prompted by God to send the leader to Jerusalem, and he offers resources and support. And then each leader encounters opposition in their efforts, which they then overcome, but in a way that leads to a strange anticlimax in each of the three parts. Let's back up and see how it fits together. So the story begins with a decree from Cyrus, the king of Persia, and he's moved by God to allow the exiles to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. And the author says this fulfills a promise made by the prophet Jeremiah that the exiles would one day return to Jerusalem. Now, this fulfillment should trigger our hopes in the many other prophetic promises that exile was not the end of the story. We have hope for a future messianic king from the line of David. We have hope for a rebuilt temple where God's presence will dwell with his people. Hope for God's kingdom to come over all the nations and bring his blessing, just like he promised to Abraham. And so it's with all these hopes in mind that we read on into the story of Zerubbabel. His name means planted in Babylon. He represents the generation born in Babylonian captivity, and he leads a wave of Israelites returning to Jerusalem. After they settle there, they rebuild the altar for offering sacrifices, and later the temple itself. The foundation laying ceremony, and then the temple's final dedication, these are key moments. The past stories of the tabernacle and temple's dedication should be in our minds. This is when the fiery cloud of God's presence is supposed to descend. He's dwelling with his people, and it doesn't happen. And so while some people are happy about this new temple, the elders who had seen the previous temple of Solomon, they cry out in grief. It is nothing like their glorious past or their hopes for the future. And it's right here that we get the first story of opposition, and it's very odd. So the grandchildren of the Israelites who were not taken into exile, they had been living in Jerusalem all along, they come to offer help with the temple rebuilding. And Zerubbabel refuses. He says, "You have no part in our temple." And this, of course, generates a conflict, which Zerubbabel overcomes, but it's very strange, because the prophets had envisioned that the tribes of Israel would all come together, along with all of the nations, to participate in the worship of the God of Israel when the kingdom finally comes. So this is an anticlimactic moment, to say the least. In the next section, we zoom forward about 60 years and we're introduced to Ezra. He's a leader among the exiled Israelites in Babylon. And he's a Torah scholar and a teacher. And so he gets appointed by Artaxerxes, king of Persia, to lead another wave of people back to Jerusalem. And Ezra wants to bring about spiritual and social renewal among the people. Our hopes are high. And again, we come to another anticlimactic moment in the story. Ezra learns that many of the exiled Israelites that had come back, they had married non-exiles who had been living around Jerusalem. Some of them were non-Israelites, and almost certainly some of them were. Ezra then appeals to the commands of the Torah, that Israel was supposed to be holy and separate from the ancient Canaanites. And he then says that the people living around Jerusalem are like the Canaanites. They're going to corrupt the exiles. So Ezra offers a prayer of repentance, and it's very heartfelt. But then he rallies all the leaders and enacts this divorce decree that says all these marriages should be annulled, the women and children sent away. And then the decree is only partially carried out. We're given a list of some of the men who divorced their wives. The story is very strange for a number of reasons. First of all, God never commanded Ezra to do any of this. It was the leaders of Jerusalem who led Ezra to make the decree. Second, the contemporary prophet Malachi, he did say that the exiles should care about purity, but he also said that God was opposed to divorce. And so the mixed results of the decree, this all fits into this pattern of a strange concluding anticlimax. Which leads us to the next section about Nehemiah. He's an Israelite official serving in the Persian government, and when he hears about the ruined state of Jerusalem's walls, he prays and then gets permission from the Persian king Artaxerxes to go and rebuild the walls. The king even gives them an armed escort and all these resources. So after arriving in Jerusalem, he begins the building project, and he too faces opposition from the people who had already been living around Jerusalem. Once again, we face a tension in the story. The contemporary prophet Zechariah said that the new Jerusalem of God's kingdom would be a city without walls, that God's presence would surround it, that people from all nations would come and join the covenant people. But Nehemiah seems to operate with the opposite vision. He informs the people surrounding Jerusalem that they have no part in Jerusalem. And this, of course, provokes them to hostility. And so while Nehemiah carries out his vision for the city with integrity and courage, they have to build the city with armed guards to protect them, we keep wondering, could this whole conflict have been handled differently? And this all leads to the conclusion of the book in two movements, first positive and then negative. Ezra and Nehemiah combine forces to bring about a spiritual renewal among the people. They gather all the exiles together for a festival. They read and teach the Torah to all the people for 7 days. And then they celebrate the ancient Feast of Tabernacles to remember God's faithfulness from the Exodus and the wilderness journeys. Then they offer a confession of their sins. They vow themselves to renew the covenant, follow all the commands of the Torah. And they finish with a great celebration over the temple, the walls of Jerusalem. And we're thinking, this could be the turning point, but it's not. The book ends on a huge downer. Nehemiah tours around the city, and he finds that the people have not been fulfilling their covenant vows. So Zerubbabel's work is undone as he finds the temple being neglected and staffed by all these unqualified people. He then discovers that Ezra's work is being compromised. He finds everyone violating the Torah, people are working on the Sabbath, and even his own work on the walls is involved because people are setting up markets around the walls of Jerusalem and working on the Sabbath. So Nehemiah, he goes on a rampage. He's beating people up, he's pulling out their hair, and he's yelling, "Obey the commands of the Torah." And his final words are a prayer that God would remember him, that at least he tried, and the book ends. I mean, it's very strange, but we've been prepared for it, right? These anticlimactic moments have been woven into the book's design intentionally. And so it raises the question, what on earth does this book contribute to the storyline of the Bible? Well, remember, the book started by raising our hopes in the prophetic promises about the Messiah, the temple, the kingdom of God, and then none of it happens. So even though Israel is now back in the land, their spiritual state seems unchanged from before the exile. And while Ezra and Nehemiah, they do their best, but their political and social reforms among the people don't address the core issues of their heart. So what the book is pointing out is the same need highlighted by the prophets Jeremiah and Ezekiel. What God's people need is a holistic transformation of their hearts if they're ever going to love and obey their God. And so the book ends on a downer, yes, but it forces you to keep reading on into the wisdom and prophetic books to find out what is God going to do to fulfill his great covenant promises. But for now, that's the book of Ezra and Nehemiah.
All right. Takeaway, my friend. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so there's huge hope that this whole spiritual movement renewal will happen with all the tribes coming worshiping at the temple. But then here you have like Zerubbabel. Like there's people who want to help and him just like saying, yeah. And so it's like, okay, there's this hope of multiple nations, but then now the nations want to help and he yells them to get out of here. And Ezra happens. And then he sees like, okay, there's people who married other people. And then you got to think of Ruth. Ruth's a Moabite. She was married into. And so then like the marriage was always about like the opposition of marriage is, are they going to get you to worship their gods? Now, if the people they're married into, vow covenant faithfulness to Yahweh, then praise King Jesus. But for him, it's about having a holy, pure line. And so he commands the men to divorce their wives and cast their wives and kids out into the wilderness. Who first? And so now here comes Nehemiah from the city wall. He's like, but then the vision for Jerusalem was that there are no city walls, and again, all the nations come and worship. And so here we have him, like other people, is like, you have no part. And then here, like in there's this hope of like a spiritual renewal, but then he finds people still just breaking the Torah. Not my walls. And so again, there's always these hopes. And yep, and this is like the beautiful thing like about the First Testament is it leaves this huge box of the Messiah and when he comes and when he causes the renewal. Thanks be to Christ, like it doesn't say like we here who are leagues away from Jerusalem. Like thanks be to Christ that the hope is coming out from Jerusalem through King Jesus to the world. Imagine if this stated that this is actually the hope is all of us to pilgrim to Jerusalem. I mean, only people who are privileged will be able to do that. And thanks be to Christ, like the temple has gone out. All right, let's read. All right, you ready? Okay, King Jesus, home for amazing. As we dive into a people group who are completely compromised, as we read the prophets, because prophets are there calling people back to covenant faithfulness. They were the covenant watchdogs. And so now we're going to read a lot of covenant and faithfulness. So we look to you, King Jesus. May we be faithful, and thank you that the writings of the ancients works on our hearts and draws us towards you. Amen. Okay, you ready? Hosea, now we're into the prophets. Hosea chapter 1, verse 1 to chapter 2, verse 1. A doomed marriage. I'm curious. Is this... Maybe we should do Isaiah for everyone, because Isaiah is like the one, after we finish Daniel and the 12 prophets, maybe we should do... Because Isaiah is like, we get a lot of, and Isaiah for everyone. And Isaiah is where we get a lot of the prophecy about King Jesus. Okay, Hosea chapter 1, verse 1, chapter 2, a doomed marriage. I'll wait for you. Yahweh's message that came to Hosea, son of Beriah, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, son of Joash, king of Israel. The beginning of Yahweh's message through Hosea. Yahweh said to Hosea, "Go and get yourself an immoral woman and immoral children, because the country commits immorality away from Yahweh." So he went and got Gomer, daughter of Diblaim, and she got pregnant and bore him a son. Yahweh said to him, "Call his name Jezreel, because in yet a little while I shall attend to Jezreel's bloodshed for Jehu's household." Remember when the king took the land? Like the guy, like there's the king, and then there is his wife, and he had a neighbor with a vineyard, and he wanted the vineyard, and so he got the owner killed because he wouldn't give the vineyard to the king. And so now here's a prophecy. So call him Jezreel, because in a little while, call him his name Jezreel, because in a little while I shall attend to Jezreel's bloodshed for Jehu's household. I shall make the regime of Israel's household cease. On that day I shall break Israel's bow in Jezreel's valley. She got pregnant again and bore a daughter. Yahweh said to him, call her name not compassionate, because I shall no more have compassion against Israel's household. So this is before the exile. Hosea is before even Israel being exiled to Assyria, and before Judah was exiled to Babylon. Okay. Is that distracting? Okay. Okay. So she got pregnant again and bore a daughter. Yahweh said to him, call her name not compassion, because I shall no more have compassion against Israel's household, or continue to carry them. But on Judah's household I shall have compassion. I shall deliver them through Yahweh their God. I shall not deliver them through bow, sword, and battle, through horses and riders. She weaned not compassion, got pregnant, and bore a son. Yahweh said, call his name not my people, because you're not my people, and I shall not be your God to you. But the number of the Israelites will be like the sand in the sea that cannot be measured or counted. And the place where it is said to them, you're not my people, it will be said to them, children of the living God. The Judahites and Israelites will assemble all together and set up one head for themselves. They will go out from the country, because Jezreel's days will be great. Say to your brothers, my people, and to your sisters, compassionate. So Hosea, Yahweh commissioned him to marry someone who is immoral. And so he has 3 kids with them, and each name symbol is a very strange way of doing prophecy. And each name is symbolizing like what Yahweh's doing through Israel and Judah. You ready? When I was barely out of my teens, I fell in love with another student. 2 or 3 years later, she discovered that she had multiple sclerosis. You know what that is? It's where your back is all funky, and it can like paralyze you. We were unofficially engaged, but she wasn't yet wearing a ring. So in theory, I could have broken off the relationship. Yet becoming unofficially engaged had meant we believed that God had brought us together. We were married for 43 years, years of growing disability and loss, but also happiness for Anne. Years of growing stress and loss, but also happiness for me. There were also years of making me more of a person who can minister to others. There's no compassion with what God asks of Hosea, though there's a little bit of overlap between our experiences. God sometimes asks tough things of people, not least in connection with marriage. The same is true of Jeremiah and Ezekiel. The toughness applies to Gomer as well as Hosea. But we don't have her side of the story. Who knows what kind of experience had turned her into an immoral woman? Yet her being such a person made her someone God could use. Many translations describe her as a prostitute, but the word isn't as specific as that. Though if she was a prostitute, the question about what drove her into prostitution will then arise. But the slang use of the word whore will sometimes convey the right impression of Hosea's language. So the word is immoral. There's a lot of modern translations will say prostitution, but it's not clear. Hosea ministered in Ephraim, and in the last years before it fell into Assyria. His aim was to forestall that event. So this is before, again, Ephraim, Israel, so the northern kingdom, right? Before they fell to Assyria. But again, Yahweh was using Hosea to say, you're going to be doomed. And with the prophecies of doom is always to bring them back to covenant faithfulness. Because Yahweh is a compassionate God. Always ready to relent. But he has to deal with something with evil. And Israel was being evil. His aim was to forestall the event. The opinion formers and decision makers in public life are the men. So it's the men he focused on. Men can be both drawn by and condemning of a woman whose sexuality isn't under their control. So God tells these men that they themselves are whores. Ephraim was supposed to be married to Yahweh, but has been involved in a long-time affair with the master Baal. So they had a covenant with Yahweh, right? Yeah. And so like it's my wife and I, we have a covenant. And so as Israel was supposed to be faithful to Yahweh, so imagine me married to Yahweh, they're supposed to be faithful. They actually were unfaithful and they committed affairs with Baal, like sacrificing children and stuff like that. That was probably Robin's. Imagine Robin's iPad. Probably put in a place where it dropped. Hey, Robin, something of yours dropped. Something. You got up and something. Yeah, it sounded like it fell in the back of the couch. That's what it sounded like. It's maybe I don't know. I was like, just check your iPad and phone. All right. So Hosea ministered in Ephraim the last years before it fell to Assyria. His aim was to forestall the event. The opinion formers and decision makers in public life are the men. Oh, we read that part. Yahweh works with the fact that in this social context, marriage is a patriarchal institution and the man is the master. The Hebrew word for master, Baal, is also the Hebrew word for husband. That is crazy. I didn't know that. So the Hebrew word for master, Baal, is also the Hebrew word for husband. So remember, like, they used to call him just the master, and they used to use master for whatever, like anytime someone was a master. You know what a patriarchal society is? It's where the men are the leaders. They are the decision makers. So it'll be me, like Robin and I are having a decision, and I go, I am Baal, master. I make the call. I make the shots. Yeah, so here Yahweh though with the with Ephraim, with Israel, is using the society to explain that they're not being faithful. The Old Testament itself rarely uses the word in this connection. Usually husband and wife in English translation represent the ordinary Hebrew word for man and woman. He's my man. She's my woman. Next section of the book will begin with an example. This usage points towards a more relational ideal of marriage. But it's the hierarchical model that provides a better model for understanding the relationship between God and us. Yahweh is the master. We are subordinate to Yahweh. In Ephraim, it doesn't work that way. Ephraim looks to that other master for its fertility and its blessing. So they're supposed to be faithful to Yahweh, but they keep like with crops, with fertility of children, they keep looking towards Baal. The offspring of Hosea and Gomer underline the point by their names. A mother I know was incensed by Hosea calling his daughter not compassion. What does that naming do to her as she grows up? Children may also pay a price for being part of a family that God is using. I was certainly fearful that our sons will pay a price for their mother's illness, but I also reassured Anne that this experience could be part of the making of them, as I believed happened. Yet we shouldn't misunderstand the way names in the Bible work. Many people are giving on names that don't look like the names people would use every day and would thus make the children the object of laughter at school. Maybe they were just used in some way at the child's naming ceremony. Jezreel was Ephraim's capital for a while. Okay, so Jezreel was Ephraim's capital. So when he named the first child Jezreel. So Jezreel can implicitly refer to Ephraim itself. It was a site of a massacre. Okay, so it was a site of a massacre involved in Jeroboam's great-grandfather's ascension. Yahweh worked through this event. Yahweh also condemns it. But Jezreel will be restored. While Yahweh responds to Ephraim's breaking off his marriage commitment by speaking in terms of divorce, you are not my people, and I shall not be your God, not be God to you. He cannot maintain that stance and withhold compassion forever. All right, we talked enough through, so we can start. Oh, praise Him. Oh, nice. Now you know. I'll be right back.
É bom estar preparada. Estás alerta. não estivessem à minha procura. Nunca se sabe quando vou precisar disto.
Hmm? Mm-hmm. Oh, there it is. I have not seen. I did not fight any enemies while I was there.
Vou dar luta. Isto. Demasiado preparada.
I like it again. Just run around, do side quests.
Tenho aqui cabeça longa.
I don't know if doing more unlocks more side quests, but
Matam-nos!
When you're running, you hit the button.
Posso respirar novamente.
Por mim acabou. Eles fugiram perante a sombra. Boa noite.
Boa carne.
I'll be right back. Get them for free. All 4 of those are free. You don't want those free boxes you could open? Back to it. I was open. Get all 3. 4 actually. But now you go to your inventory. You don't buy those because you can always just make them. So you can either sell and see if anything does.
What?
Ahorita.
Okay. All right. Saved. Okay, go through step.